So there's multiple ways you can do this. So I got my main right here. That's my main water line. I just teed off. I teed off and put a tee right there. The blue pipe goes to my frost free. But then I did stainless, well, it's a brass main valve. Then I went with stainless steel underground. I put a tee up for my blowout, and then I put a 90-degree over there for my, here's my main trunk. I teed off, brought the main line that way, and brought the main line this way. I brought the main line this way just so I can tap into it wherever I want, put in some sort of valves. There's multiple ways you can do this. So my main valve is not, it does not drain. So you could, if you have a draining valve, you could just put a T right here, have a blowout, T, and tee off to your main. That way when you blow it out, it's gonna blow out with the T to your main. The only problem is you'd have water inside there. That's why you need a draining main valve. But since I don't have a draining main valve, I did my blowout right here and did my main right there. That way when it blows it out, it's gonna blow it all out, and then I won't have any water in my line.
Yeah,
and if there is any residual water in the line, it's 3 feet deep, so it'll be fine. But there won't be any residual water inside any of the lines that are above the frost level. So we're gonna work our way in that direction. So I already have obviously my blowout. I teed off to my main. So all my valves are on that side of the property, but I did tee off my main towards that direction of my property just so I can have, obviously I'm gonna blow them out in the winter time, but for the summertime, instead of just putting some frost freeze, I'm just gonna put this valve, I'm gonna tee off my main pipe, and I'm gonna put a couple of these valves. That way I have water spigots. That's why I have the main line running around to different areas of the property. But my main, it runs this way. So the main comes into my first box, and then from there I got 4 solenoids, 4 lines, 4 valves. I got my main feeds through here, and then these 4 lines get redirected to wherever else. Then obviously they're all wired up to the computer. Pretty simple, straightforward. All the neutrals get tied together, and then different conductor per valve, and then you wire it accordingly inside the computer. But then their main feeds through here, and then it feeds to our next box respectively. Next box, so I have three boxes, total of 12 lines, and then 1 more line that goes to my my drip line. So I have a 1-inch line that just goes right by the house that will regulate my drip line for any sort of bushes that you want around the house or any sort of plants that you want around the house. It's kind of nice to have a drip line in a few different locations. All right, we can check out. Still got our main.
Papa, Jonah.
And like I said, we can, anywhere you want, let's say you want a spigot anywhere, I can just tee off of the main and bring up a spigot, you know, anywhere you want it to be. So if I want a spigot anywhere at any part of the lawn, I'll just tee off of the main, bring it out here, and then support it with a 4x4. But that way you can have water during the summertime, spring, summer, fall, up until you blow it out in the winter time. But it's very convenient to have around the house. And then here's my second box. Same thing. I got 4 valves, 4 solenoids. That goes to 4 lines. And like I said, with the conductor, so I bought a 6 conductor plus a neutral, so technically it has 7 conductors in there. Yeah, buddy, you can help me.
Daddy can help you.
So
Daddy can help you.
So I got the green going to one wire, the other wire is the neutral. I got my neutrals jumpered. So all my neutrals are jumpered, and then I got my green, red, blue, orange. So green, red, blue, orange, all my neutrals are jumpered. And then my direct burial cable, it goes to the computer. And then from there I got the green goes to line, let's say line 4, 5, 6, 7. So green would go to line 4, red 5, blue 6, orange 7. And then all the neutrals just get connected to the common. We can take a look inside the computer just to kind of see what we got going on. But either way, we got our main. It keeps feeding through. These 4 lines just go head to wherever they want to head. And obviously I have more than one pipe in per trench. So whoever drew up my plans, I mean, there's a lot more trenches drawn out. But just to not do as much digging, I consolidated it and put more lines into a trench. Just because I got so many rocks up here. And so the main keeps flowing. And this valve, so this single valve with the 1-inch line, this one is for my drip line. So I have a 1-inch. Yeah, you can help me. So I have a 1-inch line, and we can follow this line out. I got a 1-inch line. And it tees off at multiple directions. For instance, it tees off and ends right here. This is just a little temporary cover on top of it, just so I wouldn't get dirt inside there, or so these little guys don't throw rocks inside. But so I just have a stub up, and eventually I'll just tee on a drip line, and then I'll run that drip line. I'll just tee off, put a drip line, and then run that drip line around all the bushes. Nobody. And then I have it tees off in multiple directions or multiple locations around the house. That way you don't have to run drip line all over the place. You can just run your drip line wherever you have your shrubs or whatever else. Here's the computer. So for convenience purposes, I mounted my computer. It's an indoor-outdoor computer or controller or whatever you want to call it. So I have, nice. So I have power ran into the junction box, and then here's my controller. And like I said, so all my commons are in one wire nut, and then I ran them all Let me clean that up a little bit. I ran them all to the common terminal. We can make that look a little nicer. So I ran all my commons to a common terminal using 18 gauge conductor, multi-conductor direct burial. And so my line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So my first four valves. So the first valve I used a black conductor, black, red, green, orange. So my first valve was the black conductor, second valve red, third valve green, fourth valve orange. And then all the neutrals or the commons are tied together inside the sprinkler box. And then in here I just brought it to line 1, 2, 3, 4. All my commons are together. And then in my line 5, this one was my drip line. I just used the yellow. And then in the other boxes I just wired it respectively. So line 6, 7, blue, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So pretty simple, straightforward. You kind of want to wire them in a uniform order. So I started with my furthest box. My furthest line, I started it as line 1, 2, 3, 4, and I worked my way to 13 to the end of the property. That way they kind of turn on uniform in some sort of pattern. But it's not too bad. We used a trencher to dig the trenches. Rented a trencher. A little bit of pain because we had so many rocks. So once we trenched it, we went over with picks and dug the trenches a little deeper by hand and cleaned all the trenches out before we laid all the ABS pipe. But yeah, that was probably the most difficult part, was doing the digging and getting rid of all the rocks. We have pretty rocky soil here, so it was a little time consuming. Now, once all the pipes are in, all my lines are in, sprinklers are connected, now I'm just backfilling and trying to level the place out, pull all the weeds. I got the front yard pulled. I got the weeds in the front yard pulled. I just still need to pick up the rocks and do some backfilling, and then I'll work on the backyard, getting all my weeds pulled, and then collect the rocks and backfill the trenches. I ended up buying topsoil just so I can bury the pipes with topsoil. That way there's no rocks, no hard objects that are putting pressure on the pipe that could potentially make it break. So we're working on backfilling.
Wanna see my ladybug?
Yeah, in a second. Let me see. Oh yeah, it's a pretty ladybug. Okay, close it before it flies away. Good job. So yeah, we're working on backfilling all the pipes. And once it's all backfilled, I'm cleaning up all the rocks. I'm trying to plant my grass sometime in the fall. So that's kind of my deadline. It is July right now. So I'm thinking of planting the grass end of August or so. They say that.
Help me find some more ladybugs?
Yeah, I'm definitely no expert, but they say that planting grass is typically the best to plant in the fall time. So that's kind of my goal. So between now and then, I want to backfill everything, pull all the weeds, kind of disturb the soil a little bit. That way the seeds take, plant it, roll the seeds in, and let the sprinklers do their work. So in this box, the way I have it wired in my controller is that this is my very first line. So when we were looking at the controller, we looked at the conductors, black, red, green, orange. So valve number 1 I have, and these wires, they're just 2 wires, so it doesn't really matter how there are 2 wires. So all that's inside there's just a little transformer. It's a little solenoid, little coil, I guess we should say. It's a coil, so it doesn't matter which wire you use on the valve itself. So if you did the black conductor to this one and the white conductor to this one, it doesn't matter if you reverse them or whatever, because it just feeds a coil. So my black conductor went to one of these, and I use these water resistant wire nuts, just connectors. So black went to one conductor, so as you can see right here, the black and any one of these. And then the second one went to, I have it kind of taped and out of the way, but the second one went to this one where I have my neutral, which also jumps over to here, which jumps over to here, and that's where they all tie in.
Look, Daddy.
And then
There's 2.
you found more?
Yeah.
Cool. Nice.
See? One right here. One right there.
Wow, awesome.
Can you open it like some more?
So yeah, so black, red, green, orange.
Hey.
So my black is connected to my line 1 inside the controller, red line 2, green line 3, orange line 4. And so that way it starts with first line, second, third, fourth line, and then I have that wired down the line. The very starting process, the process was to start your irrigation system. So first things first, we measured everything out. Well, we do have our own well. So according to the well log and according to the pump that's installed inside my well, I know my GPM, I know gallons per minute, and my well is on its own VFD, so I have it's always constant pressure, as opposed to a pressure tank to where it fluctuates from 40 to 60 psi. I have my pump goes to a variable frequency drive, which regulates the pressure and keeps me at a constant 60 psi. So with that information, I went to our local irrigation company, and I gave them that information, and they drew out a plan for me. I guess let me backtrack a little bit. I knew the well information, and I measured out my yard. I measured out how wide I want it to be. I measured everything out. You know, it's a pretty good sized yard, about 33,000 square feet, so about 3/4 of an acre or so. So I measured it all out. I drew it on a graph paper, plotted everything out, my distances, my distance to the well. I plotted out my whole property where I want my grass to grow, and I gave that information to the irrigation company, and then they actually drew out a plan. They drew out the plan, and I went off the plan. I modified it a little bit, like I said, with the trenches. According to the plan, they had a lot more trenches, and I kind of wanted to consolidate, so I put more pipes into one trench as opposed to digging so many trenches and just have separate pipes per trench. So instead of doing that, I just dug wider, deeper trenches and put all my piping into one trench. And so once they give you the plan, then you kind of just go off the plan. You can modify it a little bit, but I went off the plan to measure out my trenches and install my sprinkler lines. And so typically the sprinkler heads, and that's the thing too, it all comes in a package. All your sprinkler heads, they spray anywhere between 22 to 30 feet apart. So some of the sprinkler heads were 22 to 26 feet, others were 25 to 30. So, and some of them are 360, whereas my outside perimeter ones are just 180. So that's all spec'd out in the plan, in the drawings that will be provided for you. But once you get the drawings, you dig your trench. We dug our trenches, installed all the piping, and then once all that was installed, all the valve boxes, once all of that was installed, then we went to wire them all up. As for the sprinkler heads themselves, obviously they're on funny pipe. And so you don't have to use Teflon or anything here. You just screw it in tight, hand tight, but tight, and it won't really leak. And it's actually, according to the irrigation company, it's spec'd out not to use Teflon tape, so be sure you're not using any Teflon tape in there. And even if it does have a slight leak, it doesn't really matter because it's your sprinkler system, so don't be too concerned about that. But this is the end of the line. So my main line is 1.25 inch PVC, and so I got 1.25 inch going out quite a few places. But then the last sprinkler line on the line, they usually bring in a 1-inch pipe just to accommodate for the pressure drop. And then the last sprinkler on the line just gets this 90. And then the sprinkler head and the funny pipe, it's called, it all came in the package. But nonetheless, we got, you kind of have to build this yourself. So we built a bunch of these in the garage and then installed them. So it has a 90 and a 90 with a chunk of funny pipe. We went about 11 inches or so. 11 inches, cut the funny pipe at 11 inches. To install the funny pipe onto the barbed fitting, we just took a heat gun and just heated up the end of the funny pipe. And once you heat up the end with the heat gun, it slides pretty easily onto this barb. And so we pre-made a bunch of these 90s. Obviously you see a 90 and a 90. So we pre-made a bunch of them for all our sprinkler lines. And then as we were gluing the pipe, we were installing these PVC 90s. And obviously it just takes in a 1 inch and then it has a female threaded end. But once you have all these installed, then you just install your sprinkler heads. And then once you backfill to where it's flush with your lawn. So that's what that's on the last sprinkler head of the line. Other than that, when you have sprinklers in line, I still gotta pull all my weeds. When you have sprinklers in line, it just comes with a T. So as you can see right here, I have 1.25 inch pipe. My piping here is 1.25 inch, and then I just have this T, and then it has a female threaded part right there, and then you thread in your funny pipe with your 90s. And that way, you just bring them in somewhere right in there, backfill it to where it's flush, and it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, and I mean, it kind of depends on how carried away you want to get. If you look at my trenches are kind of wavy. If you want to keep them extremely straight, that's fine and dandy. Mine are kind of wavy just because of how many rocks I had, so I kind of had to work with the layout of the land. But the piping came in 20-foot sticks, so it was, you know, they bend pretty easily, especially the main. You know, the main has kind of a bend to it, which I'm not concerned about because it's all going to get backfilled. Another thing, these we had to kind of pre-build the manifold. So these all came in separate. You got the valve and then you got these separate pieces. That way, if you ever do get a bad solenoid or a bad valve, you can unscrew it here, unscrew it basically right there, and you can replace the valve. But this had to be all pre-built, and so pretty straightforward. You just have a T and an elbow. Kind of glue that all together. And then with the ABS, whenever you're gluing, just be sure you're using primer and glue. So that's a biggie. We prime the pipe beforehand, or as you're gluing it, you just prime it first. Both sides, we prime the male and the bell end, or the female part. We prime inside there, and then we put glue in both ends on the male end and the female end, and then Seat it well, give it a good quarter turn, half turn, and then hold it for a second, let it set. And once it's set, it should be pretty good to go. It sets pretty quick. But as for the valves and these fittings in the valves, they're only hand tight. I mean, you want to get them tight. So we tightened them hand tight, and they shouldn't leak. Now, if they do leak just a little bit, you could maybe take a pair of pump pliers or something and maybe just tighten it a little more, but do not over tighten them, because if you use a tool to tighten these, you could damage them and actually create a leak. So these are meant to be hand tight, or if you use a tool, to use a tool very gently, not to over tighten them, otherwise they will be damaged. And then the box, we obviously had to drill the holes into the box. So we got a hole saw, drill the holes kind of wherever you need them to be, drill the hole for the main, and just kind of work with it. So keep the box pretty level, that way when it's backfilled, you still got some room, still got access to the box. And so on some of the lines, like even right here, I have my 1.25 inch main, and then I teed off with 1 inch. Teed off with 1 inch to hit some sprinkler heads, and kept it going with 1.25 inch, teed off. So this I have, obviously it's an X. And then right here, I just have a T. Once again, 1.25 inch comes in, and then I teed off with 1 inch. And since that's the end of the line, once again, it has that elbow, has the funny pipe. And like I said, all of that is hand tight. The sprinkler heads themselves, so all of them are, you'll get this, it'll be spec'd out in the drawings. But for instance, this one has that 0 full. That means it rotates 360 degrees. It doesn't rotate 180, it rotates 360. You put them together, and it has all the fittings inside the box for your pressure and for your distance. You know, these hit about 30 feet. So the sprinkler lines in our trenches themselves, so the drawings will be pretty clear about having the sprinkler heads about 25 feet apart or so, because typically you want to have about 3 sprinklers hit one section of your grass. So you want them to overlap, and so every section of my grass gets overlapped by about 3 different sprinklers. And so when they're all 25 feet apart, there's really good coverage. That way you don't have any dry spots. So yeah.
Sweet. And you save thousands by doing it yourself.
Yeah. Get some.
Thousands.
Yeah. Sweat equity. Doing it yourself. It's, it depends on your soil. If you just had dirt, no rocks, I mean, you can get this done. Oh, it could get done so fast. But for me, it's just been taking a little while just because I have so many rocks in my soil. You can see just some of my, I mean, these aren't bad, but I got, digging a little 8-inch trench, I ran into dinosaur eggs. So that was very time consuming, because once we go to clear out the trenches, you just kept running into rock after rock after rock. And so I got a nice rock pile in the back just from digging the trenches. And that is why I tried to minimize the amount of trenches that I had. So I'd rather dig a deeper, wider trench and have more piping in one trench, as opposed to digging more trenches, because with every trench came many rocks. So just to save myself the work, I kind of modified the plans a little bit. Stayed according to the plan when it came to my sprinkler lines and the sprinkler heads being 25 feet apart. But as for the piping, I kind of routed it myself. Routed it, maybe rerouted it, just so we can stay in one trench, just because my soil is so rocky. But yeah, we connected all the sprinklers, tested them all out, really good coverage, really good pressure. The sprinkler heads, they 25-30 feet, no problem. Really good coverage, and pretty happy with the way it turned out. Now I'll be a lot more happy once it's all backfilled and once I can actually mow the lawn.
Yes, sir. Mow that lawn.
And the lines, they don't have to be that deep. Realistically, all they really need to be is about 6 inches deep. I mean, mine are 8 inches. Some areas they're maybe 6 inches. They don't have to be that deep, just because you're blowing them out anyways. As long as they're backfilled, covered, they got a couple inches of topsoil, the grass is gonna take just fine. But yeah, they're gonna get blown out, so you're not really worried about them freezing over. So you don't have to go too deep. I've seen some people do, you know, they're burying them a foot deep, or, which is fine. You know, there's nothing against that. Power to them, but I guess you don't have to get too carried away. But that's all, like I said, personal preference. So this is pretty much when I was talking about the main line and teeing off the main and putting a little valve. This is what I had in mind. So once you have your main line, it would always have water in there, and so you just tee off with the PVC, and then just have a elbow like this, a threaded elbow, where you have PVC one side and the female on the other side. And underground you have that elbow, and then you just screw on this galvanized pipe, support it by a 4x4, you know, a pressure treated 4x4, clamper on, and this way you have water wherever you want. So if I have my main line running around my whole property, I can install one of these anywhere I want in my property, and they're super convenient to have. Just because, you know, if you need to water your trees, or if you need to have a bib at any corner of your property, it's really nice to have, and it's pretty simple to do. But then at the end of the season, you just blow it out with your sprinkler system, and you're good to go. And as for the drip line, this is what I had in mind with the drip line. So I have that one valve that controls my drip line, and I have it just teed up at multiple locations around the house. And so you just bring in your drip line. Obviously you want to put a pressure reducer, because the drip line is only good for, you'd have to look at the specs, but it's only good for 15 pounds or so. So you want to do a pressure reducer just because you have 60 pounds in your PVC pipe. But just make up some sort of concoction to where you have, he obviously has a female end right there with the coupling, female end, and then a male end where this female threads into there. So you can just buy any fittings that would make something like this work. But now you got a drip line that goes to all your trees, and you don't have to run a drip line very far because you have your main drip line feed going to multiple, it has stubs at multiple locations, and so once the valve comes on, you just got your drip line that feeds your shrubs, trees, and plants or whatever. So it's really convenient to have. Convenient system, and this is also a very convenient system, and it's pretty easy. All you got to do is just buy a little valve, some galvanized pipe, and a fitting. And since your trenches are already open, all the trenches are already open, you might as well put in some bibs because they're just so convenient. So that's what I'm doing. And then, so obviously there's one right here. You can see one on that corner of the house, over there. But basically they're all over the place because it's just nice to have, really nice to have. So when I ran my main was just supposed to go to one side of the house, but that's why I had my main tee off, and it encloses my house. It circles around my house just so I can have bibs at multiple locations, just for the convenience aspect. There's another drip line. Now obviously here's another drip line. So that's just coming off, same valve, you know, it's just teed off. That way you have drip lines wherever you need them to be. It's just a really convenient way to do it.